I'm Margaret Preston, president of Power Over Parkinson's, and today, in conjunction with our Pop Profile series, we have Gary Griffiths, a Parkinson's advocate and a person with Parkinson's. And as a full disclaimer, my good friend who has helped propel Pop's mission over the last year and a half or so now. And I'm privileged to be able to speak with Gary through the series. Gary, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'd like to jump right in. We know everyone's journey to diagnosis is unique. So I'd love for you to share your journey to diagnosis. When were you diagnosed? And walk us through some of the symptoms you were experiencing and how you were ultimately diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Well, I started back probably around 2011. Started experiencing, which was not an uncommon symptom based on my neurologist, Dr. Cloud, is shoulder pain. That's where it started, and it progressed from there. I initially went to an orthopedic thinking that I had a shoulder injury due to the job that I do being a firefighter, and met with him, and he did some, cortisone shots and treated me for that. And come to find out, I was also experiencing some gait issues along with that. And when that came about and I expressed that to him and told him about what was going on with that, he said, "Oh, let's stop here. I want to get you to a neurologist, and let's make sure that we aren't dealing with something more serious." So that went to Dr. White, who is a neurologist in the Richmond area. Met with him, and he sat me down and did a couple of tests, standard tests that they do for Parkinson's patients, even though there's no real true test to prove it. And he looked at me and said, "You have Parkinson's." And it was definitely a heart-wrenching experience to go through. So he brought one of his fellow neurologists in. Wasn't exactly sure, so he just wanted to make sure that I had the right diagnosis. And he came in, did the same test, looked at me, and said, "You have Parkinson's." So within 30 minutes, I had two neurologists who were well accomplished say, "You have Parkinson's." Yeah. This was in June of 2012 when I was diagnosed. So it was very heart-wrenching. It was a hard thing to really deal with because I was a firefighter. I had a family. I had young kids. I had a 10 and a 14-year-old. So it was definitely something that I had to work to try to get through and keep my life going and keep my career going to support my family. So
absolutely,
it was a tough time, but it was definitely a good way to look at it. And I changed my outlook, and from that moment, it changed for me. So.
I'm appreciative of the fact that you said shoulder pain. I think that's a unique, not terribly unique, but for folks who know the disease, understand the connection. But I'm glad you kind of shine a light on shoulder pain and kind of exploring that and the connection to Parkinson's. So that's something I think our listeners can certainly learn, that people usually think, oh, well, someone probably had a tremor or some other movement symptom. So I do want to shine a light on the connection between shoulder pain and a Parkinson's diagnosis, which of course is not 100%, but I think it's a lesser known symptom that folks can learn from your story. You had touched on, you segued beautifully into my next question, touched on you being a firefighter. I'd love for you to expand on not only your career as a firefighter, but also your military experience and some of the connections you are trying to make in terms of your diagnosis and how you spent your career in serving others.
Well, it started with my connection with Parkinson's. I was born in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, at the Naval base. And of course, everybody knows now, or a good portion of the public knows, that there's a current lawsuit pending based on some of the chemicals that were put into the water system. So my journey probably starts there before I was even born, when I was in utero. So dealing with that, then I became a Navy guy. I joined the Navy, and I spent 4 years in the military. I was also on a replenishment oiler, which had diesel fuel and jet fuel, roughly about 15 million gallons total between the two, munitions, and everything else. Spent 4 years there, and then after that, I came back, piddled around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Went to school to be a medic and got my paramedic, and then was a medic in Richmond for a few years, and then I got hired by Chesterfield Fire and EMS. And I did serve 26 years as a firefighter, lieutenant, and a paramedic. So my journey along the way, I mean, I had plenty of opportunity to be exposed to any
Yeah.
type of chemical or fuel or whatever, um, either in a water system or on a ship or in just fighting fire. So
Mhm.
that's one of the hard things about this is trying to figure out where it all started, but
Yeah.
we're starting from the beginning. So
Yeah.
and that's where we're initially starting to go
Yeah.
from there.
To your point, I think you had a lot of exposure points throughout your journey, not only as a young person, but also through your career. And I think it's important to shine a light on that as well, because as we know, with the Parkinson's Plan book coming out, and of course, Ending Parkinson's before that by Doctors Oken and Dorsey, we're all trying to create the awareness. So, Gary, your story is so important in terms of the connectivity between water and the safety and contaminants in our water, as well as our lifestyle. And you certainly led a life in service, and it shouldn't necessarily lead to a Parkinson's diagnosis. So if we can create some awareness through our discussion and kind of dovetail what work is being done on Capitol Hill, I feel privileged to be able to do that and speak with you. So thank you, and
Well,
sharing
thank
that
you.
that component too.
My
Um,
pleasure.
I'd like to, you touched on, you were diagnosed with Parkinson's, you still had young boys. Tell me about how you navigated your feelings through diagnosis because you still had immense responsibility. Your career did not end, life had to march on. So, how did you navigate those feelings of being diagnosed with a neurological disorder? What were those feelings, and how did you manage them upon finding out you were, in fact, diagnosed with Parkinson's disease?
Well, for me, I've always been an optimist. I've always been a positive thinker. My wife tells me that I'm overly optimistic at times, but that's just my nature.
Mhm.
I decided from pretty much day one I was not going to let this destroy me. I was not going to let this beat me. I looked at it as not as a disability. I looked at it as more of an inconvenience.
Mhm.
And in life, we have inconveniences, and we work through them, and we deal with them, and we do whatever we need to do to stand, to be above it.
Absolutely.
As my career, it was tough because trying to hide a tremor at a young age. I was diagnosed when I was 44, so early onset Parkinson's.
Yeah.
It's usually tremor predominant. So trying to navigate through that was a challenge. Working with the Parkinson's Movement Disorder VCU, Dr. Leslie Cloud, she is terrific. She worked with me. She did everything she could to get me through because she knew that I was only 14, 15 years into my career.
Mhm.
To save money for him to go to school. My youngest wasn't sure what he wanted to do because he was only 10 at the time, but it was still a thought that I needed to save for his education if he decided he wanted to go to a university or to go to school. We didn't want them to have to pay for that. We wanted to make
Right.
sure that they were debt free. So it was a challenge, but I kept a positive attitude. I worked hard and I did everything I could to keep that hidden until I couldn't.
Mhm.
And probably the last 4 years of my career, when I was about 21, 22 years into my career, is where it all came to a head. And once it did, the organization that I worked for with Chesterfield, they were amazing.
Mhm.
They did everything they could to get me to the end of my career so I could get my retirement. And
Mhm.
kudos to them because they were phenomenal. And I have nothing but high praises for that organization.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, I know why they were very amazing to you. Since I personally know you, you are a terrific man who has dedicated his life to not only Chesterfield County, but the United States through service. So you're being very modest in saying they are a great county and they were good to you, but there was a reason for that. And that's just
Thank
your overly optimistic nature that allows people to always feel safe and served by you. So I needed to throw in that caveat that it wasn't just a random act of kindness.
you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So,
Sure. I'd like to move on. How do you explain to others? Parkinson's, as we know, is a very, very complex disease. So how do you explain to others what Parkinson's is?
Well, Parkinson's, like I said previously, to me, it's an inconvenience. Unfortunately, it's more than an inconvenience. It's a neurological thing, of course.
Mhm.
It affects so many areas of the human body, with not just the nervous system, but the muscular system, the endocrine system, all these systems that it affects. For me, it's just probably the hardest part is knowing when to rest, when knowing when to keep pushing yourself, and knowing when to just lean on somebody.
Yeah,
And you always have to have that. So for me, probably the biggest thing is the mindset, and the body, and keeping it limber, and doing what you need to do to keep it moving, and functioning as normal as a body can with this disease. So.
absolutely. Um, as we know, Parkinson's, the most important thing we could do is stay active, as you talked about. A lot of the movement symptoms we can mitigate through exercise and movement. But while you touched on exercise, you also touched on it as a full body disease. So walk us through how, no, if we kind of compartmentalize exercise and movement, how do you stay sharp cognitively? If we think about the cognitive changes that can happen with Parkinson's, how do you keep your brain sharp and you cognitively focus as you not only navigate the movement side, but also any cognition changes?
Um, Probably for me, I've been fortunate enough. Once I retired from Chesterfield, I was able to go back part time as an instructor.
Mhm.
So, teaching has really helped me because that keeps my mind active. I'm constantly learning. I went to the continuing education portion of the teaching for Chesterfield, for their basic life support. Teaching the providers there, how to deal with Parkinson's patients and neurological disorders and stuff like that. So just teaching, and reading and learning, and keeping my mind active, and
Mhm.
along with the exercise, and getting sleep. Sleep is another big thing.
Mhm.
Trying to get at least 7 or 8 hours of rest,
Yeah.
and just knowing when my body's tired, and stopping and doing what I need to do. So.
Yeah. Mm. So, what do you do? Walk us through your exercise regimen. What are some of the modalities you enjoy? How do you battle some of those harder days when you just don't feel like doing it?
Well, for me, it's kind of a twofold. I have an exercise, not really a regimen, but I have an exercises that I do. But I'm also married to a physical therapist,
Hmm.
so she will not let me sit still, which I love, because she will push me, and she will make sure that I'm up and moving, and not being too lazy. But
I know
we
that to
try
be
to
true.
walk 3 or 4 times a week. I'm sorry.
I said, I know that to be true. Kathy is a
Yeah.
wonderful woman.
Yeah, yeah, she doesn't let me sleep or rest is too much. So
Right.
normally
Only
what I
7 to 8 hours, like you mentioned.
she make sure I get to bed on time and get some good sleep. Yes,
That's right.
but I try to get we try to walk 3, maybe 4 times a week at most,
Yep.
depending on how our body's doing. Um, I do some of the programs, or I had been doing some of the programs through you know through pop, with the heat and stuff like that. But I've actually kind of leaned more towards playing pickleball. So I play pickleball twice a week.
Hmm.
So that's pretty active, and that keeps me, back and forth and moving,
Yeah.
and then just anything else we can think of, yoga, or stretching, or anything. So weightlifting, muscle work and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Well, if you could wave a magic wand, what would it be? What symptoms would you first mitigate or tackle if you could wave a magic wand and get rid of one symptom of the disease?
Probably for me, being an early onset, would be the tremor.
Hmm.
That's probably the hardest part. Is when my tremor kicks in, my medicine starts to wear off. It can look very violent at
Yeah.
times. That's probably the biggest one, and then of course there's others like dyskinesia, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, with it being early onset, the cognitive issue isn't as big of a deal
Hmm.
as early as it is, but the tremor is, and
Yeah,
that's probably that's the biggest one. So
I understand. What would you say, or would you say you've experienced any overall silver linings being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease?
yes, it has gotten me to a point in my life where I've met wonderful people like yourself and your father. I've been able to find an organization that is dedicated to doing what they need to do. I've learned a lot about neurological diseases, especially Parkinson's, with VCU being there and everything that they offer, and just you know being able to share my story is probably the
Yeah,
biggest thing. Is
yeah,
because I like to help people, and I want to help people in any way that I can, whether being there just to listen, or just in any way possible.
absolutely.
Um, Raising money for awareness, raising money for anything, just the programs that Pop offers. I like to be able to help in any way. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, you are appreciated so much.
well, thank you.
Um, you have, I want to expand on everything you've done. You've touched on teaching, etc., but you have an, really cultivated an inspiring space upon diagnosis as a person with Parkinson's. So I was hoping you could share, kind of walk us through how you decided to be active and kind of take an active role in the community, in creating awareness and being an advocate. Kind of walk us through at what point, but I kind of think it was just your nature. But walk us through when you decided I'm going to be active in this, journey, and some of the things that you've done to create awareness and advocacy.
Probably about a year before I retired, I sat down and I briefly spoke with Kathy, my
Hmm.
lovely wife, and told her that I was looking at possibly starting a nonprofit. Worked on it, met a couple of people that had actually been to your golf tournament and
Hmm.
said that it was a great golf tournament, raised awareness for Parkinson's. And at that time, I had no idea what POP was,
Hmm.
but I knew that you guys were out of Henrico County, and that's all I knew. So I decided I was going to look into it, start a nonprofit myself. Then I spoke with you and instantly fell in love with you guys, and just decided from that moment forward I was going to dedicate every time that I could, or anything that I could, any resource that I could, whether it's my time or anything of that nature, just to get out and help those that aren't able to help themselves.
Yeah.
And I guess that just goes back to my career as a firefighter, helping anybody that I can, even though I don't know them.
Yeah.
That's just my nature. So,
Yeah. And I want to highlight, Gary has spoken to numerous people with Parkinson's through our POP Advisors program. He's volunteered his time to speak with those who are newly diagnosed and also people who just need a little one-on-one support. So Gary shared his time in that and being a one-on-one buddy through our POP Advisors program. I also want to highlight you coming to the Capitol with us as an advocate and speaking with lawmakers back in February of this year in Virginia, and creating awareness and advocacy for the disease to hopefully spur some funding right here in our Commonwealth. So I want to touch on those aspects too. That, and of course, you touched on teaching first responders about the disease, so they're aware should they encounter someone with the disease. So I just, while you may not or be hesitant to toot your own horn, I wanted to do that for you because you've been nonstop since I've known you in an array of ways. So we applaud you, and we're also very thankful for your time and commitment to Power Over Parkinson's.
well, thank you.
You're welcome. You don't have to say anything, but I wanted to throw that all out. I had that
I'm not
locked
that
and
kind. I don't
loaded.
like to toot my own horn. So, as you know me, I'm just not that type of person. I don't.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
what I
ask for the fame. So,
Yes. Um, as we know, Parkinson's has such an array of symptoms. We touched on movements or motor symptoms. We've touched on non-movement symptoms. Tell us, if you could shine a light on a lesser known symptom of the disease, just to create some awareness around that symptom that people might not know, what symptom would you want to highlight?
Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Depression is probably one of the top three in my book in terms of dealing with, because a lot of people feel very isolated and very alone, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of organizations out there with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, the APDA,
Yeah.
POP, and just local stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out. I mean, if you have a family member that has it and you know that they're not doing well, talk to their neurologist, talk to an advocate, talk to somebody in a nonprofit, anybody that you can get this out there, because there's a lot of Parkinson's that's being diagnosed, and the last thing I want is anybody to feel alone and isolated, and there's nobody there to help them.
Yeah.
So
thank you. I think that's, very well said, and something that sometimes we shy away from altogether, not even talking about Parkinson's as a culture, where we shy away from depression, anxiety, etc. But I think that's such a big, fortunately, it's a big piece of the disease and more common than, people think. So I'm glad you touched on that. And like you said, there's so many resources. And if you're a loved one with someone with Parkinson's, reach out to any one of the national organizations or POP. We're here as well. So as Gary said, whatever we can do to assist, no one is alone. We are here. I wanted to wrap up with you providing our listeners a chance for you to give us an update on how you're doing today.
I'm doing good. I'm staying on my medicine. I'm staying with the exercise as well as my body can. Hopefully in January I'll be start teaching again and get back to helping those and teaching those, how to deal with Parkinson's patients and how to treat them. And my mental health is good. I mean, I'm keeping positive. I know God has given me this for a reason, and maybe this is the reason. I was meant to meet you and your dad and help you guys in any way that I could, and hopefully we can get this disease to the front and hopefully someday find a cure.
Yeah, very well said. Well, Gary, thank you so much for your time and sharing your very important story. I'm so thankful that you shared your time for this series, and I'm also so thankful for you and your life of service and kind of continuing that and supporting POP and those with Parkinson's disease. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.